This is Jim Fetzer, your host on The Real Deal, where I have a very special guest today, a return engagement from Professor George Lees, who's been doing genealogical research on the family tree of the current President of the United States, Donald J. Trump, and has some rather surprising revelations to share with us. George, it's a great pleasure to have you back on the show.
Thanks, Jim. We were all very nervous about why you had disappeared, but I just imagine that you must have been on a massive vacation.
No, I think it was just circumstantial. No, I go nonstop. I have like 6 shows a week, George, and I can't stop. I mean, I can't take trips for any extended period because there's too much at stake.
Well, I quite shocked Jim yesterday by telling him that Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton are on the same family bloodlines. And it's quite amazing. All of that was published in the legitimate papers in Britain. I think it was the Daily Mail. And I've got pictures of all of that. And it's the bloodline is absolutely astounding. Let me see if I can find it. Sorry.
That's no problem.
I thought I had it. I sent you a version of it on Skype yesterday. It goes right back to John of Gaunt. And let's see if I can find it on this. I'll have to search for it again. But so let me get that first. I actually sent it to you yesterday on the message with the images of the bloodline trees on both sides, and it's now no surprise to me that both sides of those, the families that are down on Donald's side, include the Percys, the massive Scottish families that are of the Outer Isles, and that is the Mackay families and the lineages that the Scotsmen are so proud of that are linked to Donald's ancestry. But let me just see if I can search for the... And there's a picture. So the bloodline conspiracy that I'm going to present to you is that you're in the same bloodline as Joseph Aloysius Ratzinger, yeah, Adolf Alois Hitler. And have you heard of the families that launched the carving up of the American continent? And that is the Mason-Dixon line singers. So that is the Knopflers. And have you heard of them? They are fabulous singers about 20 years ago. And on Pope Benedict's bloodline tree, you've got Rabbi Yehuda Lowell Lieben Bezal Maharal of Prakel, and all of that is Prague. You've got the Lows of the Frankfurt ghetto, Rabbi Isaac Hakkinen, and that is my wife's name, was Hancock's, and all of it is the etymological hodgepodge that means that they are all the elite families that came out of the Frankfurt ghetto and they end up in Palm Beach, and they originated, as I've told you often, from ancient Italy, and all roads lead back to Rome, and that's why the Bush's mansion was called Vesuvius. You remember we had a little debate on that, and you told me about Kennybunker, but you remember that it was actually on Maine that Vesuvius was the home. It's absolutely stunning. And there's pictures of what was the man that made the movies, and every time he made one he appeared in it. So he was...
Oh, yeah.
They were...
Tarantino.
No, the other one, the horror stories that are Hitchcock.
Oh, sure.
So he used to always appear in his movies, and that is the parody of Arius Piso, who wrote the Bible, and because he's got so many nicknames, he appears in almost every chapter of the Bible playing a different role.
Tarantino does the same with his more recent films, but it's fascinating, yes. Alfred Hitchcock indeed appeared in all of his own movies, yes.
Yeah, so the Pope is on the bloodline that we're profiling here, and that's the Bacharach families that won the Eurovision Song Contests, and that is, who else is on it? And the Chavs, the Chavims, I think they're also from Eastern Europe. Rabbi Moses Samson, and that is Mrs. Simpson and Bacharach in the Frankfurt ghetto right through its history. And what they do is they call themselves the Exilarch families, and that is the chosen ones in the Bible that follow St. David's. The killer of Goliath was David, and that is the Davidic bloodline tree that the Bushes and all these powerful families are on, and the Setzers are on it too. So I'd love to show you the stuff. Let me have another look for the. So if you look for Prof. George Lee's, my website, and you look for Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, you'll see the whole of the family tree, and it's absolutely stunning and absolutely fascinating. Oh, and I need to shrink you down a wee bit. How do you do that? Size, minimize. Oh, crikey. So, Trump, Clinton. And it was all published in the Daily Mail about 3 or 4 years ago. And on my website it's Donald Trump, Draft Dodger in Vietnam, the Rhine. Quite a catchy title, but yeah, he dodged the draft at the rank of captain in the army, and that's just one generation after his dad had been running the brothels for the Yukon Gold Rush. You've never heard about any of that stuff?
No, you're just.
Well, it's all published in Wikipedia, and he tried to cover it up for a wee while, but it's now back on Wikipedia again. And his dad was called Fred, and his middle name is Christ, and that's the reason why the male parent is not on the bloodline tree that I'm now taking you into. So there it is, Donald Trump, Draft Dodger, Vietnam, the Rhine, Double World War II, Roddenroth, Pye, Pimp, Percy, Pierce, MacLeod of the Isles of Scotland, Palestine, Johann Lewis, Exxon Maples, Gascoigne, Genie, Oil, Chevron, Masons Incorporated. And the Masons have a huge role to play in the financial crimes that I've just been learning about at the beginning of the Shin and right through world history beyond it. There are thousands of Masonic plots, and all of that is the families that lead the world to war again and again and again. But let me go down the Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton. They are revealed to be distant cousins, as family trees show they share the same set of royal ancestors, and it's called Rhineland Palatinate, and that I believe is where the Setzer family came from, and they're all linked to Rockefeller, and the naming for that I will reveal to you later on. I've got a few case histories. So if you look up Sibylla Louise Schuster's, formerly Trump's, daughter of Christian Johannes Trumpf in brackets Drumpft. Yeah, that's Drumpft. That's a frequently used name right through their bloodline trees. But let's go back to John of Gaunt, and there he is, first Duke of Lancaster. That's the Wars of the Roses in British literary history, and I think that also gets converted into Shakespearean stories. There's Catherine Swynford, Duchess of Lancaster, and there is John of Gaunt himself in his red and black spooky looking uniform with the king's throne on his head. So down John of Gaunt's left hand side of the tree you have Joan Beaufort, Eleanor Percy, and a picture beside Eleanor Percy of the poison garden in Alnwick, because that is what the Percys that are the dukes of Northumberland and were Perseus the poet in ancient Rome. and that becomes Barbara Pierce, yeah, as I've explained before, who's the wife of George Herbert Poppybush. And all of it is absolutely stunning. And in Britain, we have all sorts of covers for it. So on the bloodline for the male gender that is John of Gaunt, we have Margaret Gascoigne, and everybody in Britain knows that Gascoigne is the legendary footballer, and he has affairs with all of the aristocrats all over the kingdom. And then you get to Margaret Ogle. That is the legendary Ogilvy families of the north of Scotland, and that is Queen Alexandria of Russia. She married Ogilvy, and that is the launch on the telly of the Saint programmes. Can you remember it? The Saint, it was like a detective programme. But they are the Ogilvys of Airlie, and they were the people. Angus Ogilvy married the widowed wife of, I think it was George VI. It's right up in that stammering king era, and just in the lead up to World War II. But that is the Ogilvys that live up near Dundee, and I tried to find their mansions, but nobody would let me do that. So there's Dorothy Ogle again, Lady Grey, Isabel Grey, Margaret Rodham de Grey, and that is now the Roddenroth families that are Hillary. It's absolutely stunning. And there she is on the left hand side. There's John Rodham, John Rodham, John Rodham, John Rodham for 4 different generations, and then you get Hugh Rodham. And as I was looking through all of those family trees one by one, you find Johann Philip Drumpft, 1667 to 1707, and that is the one that you're sighted in about the second row. Juliana Maria Drumpft, née Roddenroth, then Johannes Sebastian Trumpf, 1699 to 1756, married Susanna Margareta Drumpf, and in brackets her maiden name was Chancellor Cole's bloodline. It's absolutely stunning. And there we have the transition from the Rothschild red hexagram to the Rhineland Palatinate story that is the launch of Israel and the blue hexagram. And by that time we're down to Jonathan Rodham, Joseph Rodham, Jonathan Rodham, Hugh Simpson Rodham, Hugh Ellsworth Rodham, and then eventually out pops Hillary Rodham Clinton. And in the tree, it's absolutely stunning. So can you remember the man that got $2 million to launch the bomb on Japan? He's in the bloodline for Clinton Percy, and he's President Harry Truman. And there, in the Scottish genealogy, he's the 6th or 7th cousin of Tam Dalyell in the Bings, and there's a woman who was head of Labour in Scotland, and she's Keza Dugdale, and she's had to resign because I've revealed that she is Keza Dugashvili. Yeah, and that is Stalin's bloodline, and all of them are created and sired as Rothschild bastards, and that takes us to the other side of the tree. So that's now Donald's side, and much of it is Scottish, and we're very proud of that, but loads of the covers are just Scottish comedies. So the Mackay family is a huge part of it, and I don't suppose that you ever get the comedies that we get in Britain, but that was the Porridge comedies featuring Ronnie Barker, and the jailer was called Mackay, and on it goes. And the same actor plays the local hero, and that is, you know, selling off the local beaches as oil finds. And it's just a massive Muppet show. So below Catherine Swynford, who was the concubine for John of Gaunt, 1st Duke of Lancaster, you get John Beaufort, and they're just over the border. I'm now living in a town called Coldstream, and that's first. Oh no, sorry, they're way down in the south of England. So John Beaufort was first Earl of Somerset. Joan Beaufort was Queen Consort of the Scots. Then John Stuart, that is the Stuart dynasty that were the Jacobite rebellion. It's absolutely amazing. And what Greg Hallett has informed us of is that the Shin was all premeditated so that the Germans could take over the whole of Europe, and then eventually they took over the whole of America. And that is the book that is now out of print on how to take over the world. And I believe that Queenie has done for him and silenced him. If you've got a copy of that book, I've got several questions that I'd love to ask you just live, but not on air. How to Take Over the World, did you ever get any of them?
I have Greg's books.
Oh, that's magic. So I'll talk to you about that with nobody listening in. Because
Sure.
what happened was that everybody, when Queen Anne passed on, the crown of England was given to the Germans that were actually Protestants. But Greg has chapters in that section of his books that tell you that there's a Jewish con, there's a Catholic con, and there's an Anglican con. And I now understand what the Catholic con was. So everybody that was Queen Anne's claimants, all of them were Protestants. That's Lutherans and Episcopalians, and all of them. That was the only way you could be a king or a queen without having your head cut off. And all of that was declared by the military government that was led by Oliver Cromwell. And he's the first one of the earliest chancellors at Oxford University, and they with Cambridge, Göttingen and Heidelberg were immune from bombing right through World War II. So that the Coles and all those bloodline trees were immune from any risk in the war. So we've got John Stuart, first Earl of Atholl, Elizabeth Stuart, Elizabeth Gordon, and that is Countess of Sutherland. Now that is right on the north coast of Scotland, and that is where the Bowes Lions, who were the Queen Mother, in inverted commas, because Greg told us that the real mother of the Queen fled to Denmark so that George VI could have legitimate viable babies and that they would not die on the gurney, because they were epilepsy prone. That's quite stunning for me. And we used to go on our holidays to the place that is Sutherland, because ironically it's right on the northern coast of Scotland. And then the next person in the bloodline tree is Alexander Gordon. That's the Gordonstown School that the British Royals still go to. On the River Spey Valley. He's 12th Earl of Sutherland, and those are the Dukes and Duchesses of Sutherland that own Merton, that is the richest college in Oxford, and they are my neighbours in the borders, and that is the Duchess of Sutherland that sent the colonists to the colonies for stealing bread, and that, sadly for all of us, is Rupert Murdoch. And so then you've got Donald Mackay, and there's a picture on my camera of the jailer that is Mackay in the Porridge comedies. Porridge is a Scottish... have you ever had porridge as a dish in a restaurant or at breakfast time?
I'm sure I have on.
It's a great...
It's kind of like oatmeal, right?
Yeah, that's right. And all the poor people had to eat it right through Scottish history. So there is Ronnie Barker. He's in the Chipping Norton set, and they are the Barkers that were the earliest translators of the Germanic Bible into English. And I can't remember what the name of the city was in Germany where the Bible printing began en masse. It's legendary. Gutenberg? Gutenberg Bible, yeah, that's right. So there's Isabella Mackay, Alexander Mackay, Robert Mackay, Anne Souci Mackay, Mary Mackay, and then you get to the MacLeods of the Isle of Skye. I think the Mackays are on they're on one of the outer isles too, but I can't remember exactly which one. And everything that is in comedies or dramas on the telly, the Mackays now just become a cover for it. But Barker was one of the translators of the Christian Bible, and they're in the Chipping Norton set as David Cameron's, that effectively they are the people and the equivalent of Donald in Britain that have stolen the entire world, and all of it is absolutely a master plan, and Greg's the only man that has collated all of that information. I think I'll be second in line for that, but I don't want to get what he got. It's just amazing, but it's great news that you've actually got that book. So what
yes, well, it's a set of books, of course.
So what they did
four or five volumes, yeah.
When George I to George IV, they were all coming across from Hanover, and that is Blind Prince George of Hanover and Teviotdale, and I live on Teviotdale, and I've caught all of my salmon on there, and that is where Blind Prince George came across, and he's still the family that were the Hanoverian kings, and that were able to, in a secret marriage, to sire the only legitimate baby of Queen Victoria. That was Marcus Manuel, and that is the continuing efforts to get the name Manuel into the diversionary tactics, because he was the true king of England that Greg told you all about. And that's why Manuel Barroso, Manuel the waiter in Basil Fawlty, and all of those comedic roles are now played, and the murder of the people that he was murdered, and that was commissioned by Edward VII, who was the biological parent of Winston Churchill, and that's why Winston Churchill had royal marks, and he was used for the siring of the Queen's babies. That's Bill Clinton is the Queen's half-brother. And all of that I now understand because Greg used to send me the PDFs, and I've now translated them into videos on those topics, and it's absolutely sensational. So Bill Clinton is the love child of Pamela Digby Churchill, and he was conceived in 10 Downing Street when Winston was the PM. And that is the Winston Churchill that Greg told you, and I remember you were shocked by it. He told you that he was the first cousin of the man who is the Bank of England boss, and that's the Rothschilds, and he's the first cousin of Adolf Hitler, who they fought the war against. Can you remember being stunned by that?
Well, I'm also being stunned by many of what you're telling me today, my friend.
So that's the book, Hitler Was a British Agent, and the one that I've not been able to find anywhere is How to Take Over the World, and that's because it's now out of print, and the Queen and her cousin Adolf are on the front cover. So, and then the MacLeods come in. Now they are on the Isle of Skye, and I believe that they're Jewish. They have all sorts of ceremonies that claim that we are Jews and that we're prepared to blow this iconic horn, I forget what they call it, on the Isle of Skye, but that is where the Register of Tartans is in British history, and it's a massive pistic. So that is the launch of false religion as well, because Tartan is an anagram for the TARDIS and the other massive Dutch gods that are Taranis, and that is also an anagram for Sinatra for some unknown reason. But yeah, that is the launch in Holland, where the Roosevelt family are very much part of this plot, and they are directly related to the Bushes and the Murrays, also of Scottish history. That's Outlaw Murray of Selkirk, and that is where the Roosevelt family came from too. So there's Donald John Trump Sr., and there is him again in what is a picture of him as a youngster, and it's entitled G.I. Joe. Yeah, so he's the man that dodged the draft because he said that he was he had bad feet, I think. And so that's that picture is called Donald Trump, brother Brothel de Palatinate, and Hillary Roddenroth Clinton, Percy Pierce, Bush Rothschild, hexagram for Palestine, Truman, Stewart, swastika, Hitler, HRH, QE2, and how to take over the world with our cousin on the other side. So, let me get you now to the bloodline tree that you can find. If you look up Trump on Wikipedia, I think that's where I found it first. There's the one, I think, that tells you that his family were wine growers and they were from the Palatinate. Now, have you seen the fabulous movie that gets everybody that loves the land of the free on the edge of their seat? So that is Air Force One.
Oh yeah, sure, I've seen with Harrison Ford.
Yeah, it's one of my favourites for all time, and all of it, or most of the scenes that involve airports, are in the German territories that are the Palatinate. So there's the scene where the kidnappers of the president in the movie are running short of fuel, so they try and land and get refueled, but because there are enemy soldiers down below and they're already beginning to shoot at them, they just, I forget what you call it when you dive down towards the airport, and just as they're getting the wheels out so that they can touch down, they decide that the heavy flak is too heavy and they take the plane up again. So that airbase is called Ramstein, and that is Ramstein, and that is in Kaldstadt. That is the home and place of origin of Donald Trump's family. And the other legendary family that is in there is the Heinz family, that are the billionaires from making 57 varieties of sauces. Did you used to get?
Sure.
And ironically, when I made my, I used to be a professor in neuroscience and nerve issues, and I was, for some reason, in my inaugural lecture in New Zealand, I talked about taste buds and how the Heinz sauces light them up. And I had no idea at that time that the Heinz family were to become Forbes rich listers, but I've still got the slides if you want to be bored to death. Yeah, it's amazing. So let me just read you some of the names, because the family trees are ever so difficult, and when you visit them for the first time and you discover things that are sensational, YouTube still have the capacity to turn off your internet access, and it's really frustrating. They also use copywriting, because all the families that are the rich listers and all the power brokers in all the wars, the Glorious Revolution is a perfect example of that. So loads of families came across from Holland with William of Orange, and they were totally turncoats, and they're dedicated to the planning of the whole of that takeover, and that becomes the Orange aristocrats along the Baltic coast that are titled of Orange, and many of them, because the gods have been totally written out of the stories and replaced by the non-existent Jesus, that is why so many of those families that actually go as Prince of Orange onto the ski slopes, many of them have fatal accidents. And it's absolutely stunning to see on the Committee of 300 how many of those accident-prone people are now the victims. And I believe that the gods have wakened up, and that since Carrie Fisher and her mum died in the same week, there's been a massive change in the world-owning families, and that's the Queen of England will no longer lay the poppy wreath because of my storytelling and how Poppaea was their ancient descendant in Rome. And that is why, you remember we had the little disagreement about George Herbert Poppy Bush, and you thought it was just because of his fundraising for the war dead. But when you see what they've actually done in those London Olympics celebrations, they're actually perpetually laughing at their own war dead. And that's why she's not got the courage now to put the poppy wreath there. And Butcher Haig was the person that launched the Poppy Fund, and he also launched the British Legion, and that is a massive money stream for all the injured soldiers around the world, and it's just totally ruthless. So the London Olympics was launched by Mr. Bean the comedian, and that the real Charles Bean in Gallipoli was the war correspondent for Gallipoli, where 80,000 Anzacs died in 8 months. It's totally ruthless, and she now has a conscience about all of that. And that I believe is a very constructive sign. But so, the tree, let me read you the top of the tree. Oh, crikey. Are you still there, Jim? Sorry, my listeners, the computer has failed me again, as often happens at sensitive times. So twiddle your fingers or something. If you're Johnny Depp, count them. Sorry, Jim, that keeps happening when I get to sensitive bits.
No, I know. I know about it.
But do you get that too? Or are you in...
we were both cut off, but you were frozen first, and I began commenting on what was going on.
And how does one freeze the opposition's computers then? What's the technology behind that?
Oh, God, I can't spell it up, but it's real. We got 30 minutes, so we're perfect. We're halfway through.
So let me find that tree that's got you on it.
Sure. And tell me, and then we'll resume recording.
And do you remember Michelle Pfeiffer and all those fabulous actors and actresses? The spelling's exactly the same. And if you find the earlier ones, it's quite stunning, because that Maharal Pope Benedict tree has got folk like Gwyneth Paltrow on it, and that has been taken down off my computers for years. And it was quite stunning, but she's in that bloodline. So is Prince Charles, and that was what we were talking about when we crashed it. But
you were just starting to talk about Poppy Bush.
Yeah, well, Prince Charles is in Vladimir the Impaler's bloodline tree. and that is along in Eastern Europe, and the royals are quite proud of about that. You can actually see videos that have been made by them, and that is I think it's Czechoslovakia or somewhere like that, and they have got one of the richest oil wealth economies in world history. That is why Hitler went to the east to take over Czechoslovakia and the Balkans, and that's why they went back into the Balkans again, because the oil wealth in Czechoslovakia is something like 10 million barrels per day. And that's why Hitler went there, and he made the decision, and it's called the Mannerheim decision. He made the decision in a railway truck, and that railway truck is now in Percy's, Northumberland, outside one of the local pubs. And that is the Mannheim. I used to go to Mannheim in the Palatinate, which is Donald's homeland, and that is all of it is the joke about the Bible author being the man throughout world history.
George, I haven't resumed taping. What you're saying is wonderful. Can we? I'll start taping again.
Yeah.
3, 2, 1. George, we're back connected. Please do continue.
So you now realise that I've been researching for nearly 7 or 8 years the history of the Bible author and how he's corrupted the entire world. So that is the launch of the police, it's the launch of the prisons, it's the launch of the pistols, and that's why the Bush family used to carry the pistols. And one of the reasons why Hitler went east rather than going across the Channel and taking all the English threat away, and that's why England was defended not by massive militias but by the retired Dad's Army for a laugh. Yeah, that's retired soldiers at the end of their life, and all of them were just volunteers, and they were the people that were in charge of the south coast of England. And it took Hitler 4 years to make that decision, but he went east because the Mannerheim decision was made, and everything that has the man in the title, like the word mansion, it's the explanation for the whole of the oligarchy and the whole of the Illuminati families now live in those massive mansions, all of them named after the Bible author, and that decision was made in discussions with Mannheim in Germany about where the oil wealth was, and that's why Hitler went to the east, and that's why the massive battles at Stalingrad occurred, and I think 1.5 million people died in that. And that is Stalingrad, and guess what it got named after that because of the reverence to the Bible author?
Yes.
Can you guess?
Oh, you'll just have to remind me, George.
Oh, you're a dimwit. You may be a British royal. That is St. Petersburg. Do you get it?
Yes. Yes.
My
wife has visited St. Petersburg.
Really?
I've not been there, but and our daughter made a cruise.
So did you know that the museum that is the Hermitage,
yes,
that's the cover for Paul McCartney's residence on the Northtown River where me and my son used to go to fish?
Really?
Yeah, and the other thing that they have, the Future of Russia Fund, is run by Murdoch and 2 of his sons. It's run by Jacob Rothschild and his son Nathan. It was run by George Osborne, the Chancellor, and by your hero, who's one of the biggest killers in recent world history. That is, Greg told us all about him. He's the world's biggest killer, and he used to cuddle Hillary in the run-ups to the elections. Henry Kissinger.
Well, it's hardly one of my...
Oh, thank you for that, Jim.
He's one of the great monsters of world history. He's probably been responsible for the death of nearly as many as Stalin and Mao.
Yeah, that's right. And all of them are, from the same bloodlines. So Stalin's a Rothschild, and he's the families that we're talking about. Let me see if I can find it on Facebook. So the Hohenlohes and the Hohenzollerns are part of that Heinz-Trump empire, And when you get to the Rockefeller bit, they just add it onto the end of the name. So that is Sibylla Louise Schuster, formerly Trump, daughter of Christian Johannes Trump, and that is spelt, she's Trump in brackets as the maiden name, but the male gender husband is Drumpft. Yeah, and that is the joke about the little drummer boy that is David Bowie and Bing Crosby. Have you seen the movie clip about the Christmas visit of David Bowie to Bing Crosby's home? And they sing Little Drummer Boy, par-rum-pa-pum-pum. And all of it has got that Drumpft little joke in that this is our bloodline tree and we own the world. And it's absolutely stunning. And I think Bing Crosby was one of the leading profiteers for the Lend-Lease scheme. And I don't think any of that went to the dead soldiers or their families. It's all the elite families that planned the war to get rid of the hungry eaters. And that is why the Queen in England is no longer so vicious, because I think she's seen the light at long last. But I better not get too confident about that, because twice she's tried to section me. So there is the name Kober, Elisabetha Trumpf, née Freund. So that is the Freud families that launched psychiatric health, yet in inverted commas, because everything they do there, every human is just on a bell curve. Yeah, it's a normal distribution. So you get super performers and you get subnormal performers, and most of the folk are just somewhere in the middle of the bell. But what they're doing now is that if you think somebody's got a weakness or they're kind of educationally slow, then they medicate them for profit. And that's been happening for years. And that is the Freud family. And they were also called Wittgenstein. And because they're the launch of mental health, 4 of the sad bastards tried to commit suicide. Only 3 of them succeeded. Have you heard of them?
Fascinating.
So let me just go through the names in case I forget any. So that's Elisabeth Trump, née Freund, and that is the massive Holy Roman Austrian serial killers that were Barbarosso, and that is why that I forget what the old folk were before that bloodline tree became Freud. So that is Matthew Freud that married Lizzie Murdoch, and they're now divorced. And every one of those guys that get married from those family trees, they then get married to somebody else that is in the New World Order team. So that's why Mick Jagger's wife has now married. She's Hall, and she's married Rupert. And Putin is now the lover of Wendy Deng, who was his ex-wife. And the first wife was Glaswegian, and she's closest of all to the Bible author. Her name was Man. It's absolutely stunning. So that's his 3 weddings so far, and I'm looking forward to his funeral. I think I may not get an invitation, but I'd love to sneak in. So he's like the world's imperator now. But let me. So there's several family members have formed cadet branches in the United States, and that's the Trump family. They're from Karlstadt, and that is the electoral Palatinate, Holy Roman Empire today in modern Germany. And there is the 2 most famous families are Frederick Trump, 1869 to 1918, and his wife Elizabeth, née Christ, 1880 to 1966, both natives of Karlstadt. So if you can get the time for a little bit of research on the Setzer linkage, I don't know whether or not that would be your hometown too. But the
well, the family immigrated to the United States from a region in Alsace-Lorraine, actually, and came to the United States in Virginia, and
so Alsace is legendary. I used to work there in Basel, and that is one of the biggest banking frauds that has ever happened. And that is the Bank of International Settlements in Basel, where all the federal bankers go and they meet 10 times a year, and that is one of the reasons that the doctors tried to section me, because the doctor that was the assistant to Dr. Ian Fingland, who trained as a policeman first, the other one was called Dr. Basil Switzer, to cover the Bank of International Settlements in Basel. And that is Basil Fawlty, the comedian, and he beats up his little waiter in the comedy, and his little waiter is called Marcus Manuel, like the true King of England. Do you get the cover-ups? Are you still there? So, do not mention royal murders, please.
George, say that again. I want to capture it. Just hold your breath. 1, 2, 3.
Please,
Okay.
Jim Fetzer, do not mention royal murders, please. Yeah, or the true King of England. It's ever so commonplace that they top their rivals, and all of the orders are given by Rothschild, and Greg told us all of that. But yeah, it's absolutely ruthless. But I just wanted you to know that you're on those family trees, and that is not guilt or anything like it. But if I were you, I would want to know who my fatherland creators were, because that's the Third Reich, and you now understand the Shin and George Bush's diaspora to America. That happens again and again and again. That is the Wooster family in World War II. That is the Scherf family, was the nickname for George W.'s family. And that is also the Shin is the same. but the families that went there, in the stories that the other investigative journalists told me that got me all lit up and excited by those stories, they were just the names that were familiar from Hitler's team. So Scorzerny was Hitler's assassin, Goebbels, Mengele, they were the friends of Bush, and all of them are pictured. If you look up Peter Eyre or somebody like that, or Nikolov, he was the American guy that used to be a mafia man, but when Hitler's assassins appeared in New York and places like that, they were quite well, they were well respected for rather obvious reasons. But when you understand the genealogy, all of the folk that are on those family trees for Wooster, Scherf, and I forget what the other ones are that also went across. So every great conflict, you get a massive number of turncoats that are actually double agents through the war, and that is the Hogan families, and none of those videos on those topics have ever been allowed to be published, because that is the slaving families of Liverpool, and the Hogans are still under Liverpool Football Club directorates. It's absolutely stunning that they can get away with it and are absolutely brazen about it. But yeah, so the families that are the banking dynasty, almost all of them go across, and that is the Duke of Wellington. You remember Greg telling us about how the Rothschilds took over the Bank of England, and they used Scanderoon pigeons for all of that. So that is the telling of the story and the creation of the capacity to read the future or to get a quick decision made. And that's how Nathan Rothschild crashed the stock market in London when he told them that Napoleon was winning. And the Scanderoon pigeon, Greg explained that goes right back to Alexander the Great, who used them and bred the breed. And that is the earliest forms of, how to take over the continents and to get the news across, and duping the people in the financial services industry. It's absolutely amazing.
I used our interruption to check out, verify what I had believed to be the city from which my ancestors had come in Alsace-Lorraine, and that was Winchester. They came from Winchester in Alsace-Lorraine to Winchester, Virginia.
Wow, we've got one.
Which they helped to found.
We've got one in Britain too, and that's the Beatles song, Winchester Cathedral.
Yes, and I'm a huge fan of the Beatles.
But they are actually in those Illuminati family, which is why they sing all those songs. So the yellow submarine is the Rothschild family icon, and the Mulligan tire, that is them celebrating the fact that they killed 29 people that were in the position to end the Irish Troubles, and instead the helicopter was crashed onto the beach. And the American Navy SEALs, they got a huge stash of, I reckon, whether it was gold bricks or whatever they were carrying. But you're not allowed.
I can't believe we're being interrupted again.
How?
Keep going.
All right, so you can predict it's going to crash.
Yeah.
Your middle name's not Christ, though, is it?
It is not.
Good. It's quite stunning. So he led them into the gold rush, and their profession then was brothel owners. And they tried to cover that up for a while. But yeah, it's really difficult to do that because everybody across Europe is aware of the local history. But that Karlstadt place, and they're also, it's really close to Fulda, and that is where St. Boniface is the launch of false religion. So in Fulda, St. Boniface's cathedral is there, and he went there from England, if the story's true, and their cathedral in England was in Devon, which becomes heaven for the Christians. It's just totally ruthless, and that is where also William of Orange's fleet landed. So Fulda is where the cathedral is for Donald, and I forget what the other bit of the story is. They've got a massive statue of him, of St. Boniface, and that is the links that I've told you about before. Oprah Winfrey's body doubles come and see me frequently in restaurants in Britain, and she's Von Fried, and that is the name of the St. Boniface family was Fried, and that is the reason that Oprah Winfrey was going to be running for president when all of that news was breaking. And did I ever make videos on Christopher Martin and Coldplay? That was my most sensational period as a journalist. And that is, Christopher Martin is directly descended from Flavius Josephus, and that is just one of the nicknames for Arius Piso. And all of it is sensational. I used to be a Catholic altar boy, and every Easter weekend we used to have to parade up and down the aisle carrying the Paschal candle for Easter, and it's got Alpha to Omega on it, and that's the beginning and end of his name. And you can now guess why P&O shipping lines are thus named. All of it is like the police, named after the Bible author, and he's the man. And that is where I went to make my pharmaceutical consultancies work, to Mannheim in Germany, and that is where the Mannerheim Treaty was signed, so that Hitler went to Czechoslovakia so that they could take up the ownership of 10 million barrels of oil a day. I don't suppose you'll have seen Auf Wiedersehen, Pet was a hilarious comedy here, and the actors in it are typically British. They've all got British accents, but they went to lay bricks in Mannheim, and the owner, the man who built the Roman wall into Newcastle where the bricklayers lived before they went to Mannheim in Germany, he was the governor for the Roman Empire in Britain and northern England, and his business back in Mannheim was a brick manufacturer, and that is where they got all the materials to build the Roman wall between Scotland and England. And it's absolutely stunning, and that's why that programme was made as a comedy, but almost all of the members of the cast have now died. It's really dangerous to laugh at the real gods, and that, I believe, is why the Queen's panicked. Even Prince Harry, when he went to Scotland, he was getting quite close to me, and I believe that is what they do before they talk people. So when he went with Meghan, when they were still courting, he got severely bitten by a donkey, and that in their Bible story is Jesus. You understand all of those Delaney's donkey stories, and that is Franklin D is Delano, and that is Delaney's donkey for all the Irishmen, and that is the Irishman that was Delaney had the donkey, and that is Val Dunican, and he's just the cover for Val Duncan on the Committee of 1001, and that is the whole of his life is an obfuscation for the fact that Jesus never lived. And it's
we're going to have a challenging time completing this. Absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, well,
continue.
Because you were unavailable for so long. So what else about? So the ironic bit is that Air Force One. And do you know if Gary Oldman, that was the terrorist in the plot, is he part of Goldman Sachs? Because that is the families that launched the Fed, and it's quite stunning what I've discovered on that theme. Oh, God.
George.
Sorry, Jim. It's probably just my computer, but it only ever happens when I'm on the hot topics. Shall I just reel off the names to you on my list of notes that I made this morning, really quickly, without mentioning any sensational things, and that will let you have a look at possibly your family tree?
Sure. Hang on, and I'll start us again. 3,
Okay.
2, 1. Welcome back, my friend.
Okay, Jim. So let me just tell you that. So 1865 to 1931 on the Genie family trees. Look up Sibylla, in brackets Louise Schuster, formerly Trumpf, daughter of Christian Johannes Trumpf, and that's spelt Drumpft, and that was the surname of the family for several generations. She then married Catherine Kober Trumpf, Elizabetha Trump, and then the Freund name comes in, and that becomes Lizzie Murdoch, Sigismund Freud, and the Sigismund serial killing dynasty that is the Holy German Roman emperors. That is the launch of Constantinople and the Turkish menace, and all of the denominations beginning to fight against each other. So that is Catherine Kober Trumpf. She married to Georg Schuster, died 1931 in Manhattan, New York. Now the name Pennsylvania is very important in biblical history and in the history of Europe, because you've got one in Germany and they've got one in New York. And then you've got Bad Dürkheim, and the families that are there are the Goslings and the Goose, and that is still the icon for the Barclays banking group in Britain. And the Gosling banks were one of the earliest in Hanover, and that is massive. So the Rothschild movie starts with the mentioning of the concept that there's a massive stash of cash coming in from Hanover into the Frankfurt ghetto, and you now understand the Frankfurt ghetto is just a massive piss take. So my favourite song, which I thought was about oral sex, it's the summer of '69, but '69 is actually the address for the Rothschild family in Judengasse. And all of that becomes a pop hit song. So the other places that they're famous for are Bad Dürkheim, Johann Trumpftheller, and this is the Rockefeller linkage, and that is the Rockefeller icon is a golf ball, and that's Donald's Augusta Master Race Course, and that is the Masters event in American golf. So you've got the Goslings and the Geese are the earliest banks in Hanover, and on the Johann Seb Trumpf. So Seb Coe was a British athlete, and he's on the American presidential bloodline trees, and he with Princess Anne scammed the London Olympics, and that was Lord Condon, who's a papal descendant. He was supposed to be the man that was leading the policing of the event, but instead they had to get private companies to do it, and the reason for that is that Lord Condon is a director at G4S, the security company. It's a comprehensive mafia operation right through world history. So the Hohenlohes and the Hohenzollerns and the Clement families, they are all part of this bloodline tree. And the Clements, they're in the In Bruges movie, and she's Clement Peso, and all of it is the derivatives of the Piso name. So do you know who your newsreaders are that are Piso descendants?
George, you just...
So that you've got a guy called Sopel, and he presents the news for the White House. And I think I've told you before that Cathy Kay, who also presents the Sky News from the White House, she's you remember Cathy Kay was the woman that was involved in the killing and the Mars issues. that were talked about when JFK was killed. So Catty K was the name of the woman that was found dancing in a nightclub with one of the patsies, but that has now been, that is the renaming of the Sky newsreader in the White House. She's Catty K. Her real name is Montgomery, and that is the Field Marshal Montgomery that was in charge of the 8th Army in North Africa. She's a direct bloodline descendant, but because they want to keep it a secret that she's not really Catty K, they have given her plastic surgery and a facelift, and she's now beautiful. You should see the pictures before and after. She was pug. That might get the video blocked.
Well, I'll just tell you, Americans, unlike the British, and I think it has to do with the fact that you have an hereditary monarchy, Americans have very scant interest in genealogy, it seems to me. I mean, with exceptions. You know, some want to trace their own family tree. But there's not a preoccupation among the public with issues like these. They are fascinating, however. And
well,
you're certainly presenting a host of findings.
Etymologically, Price is part of the naming. So the family that is George W. Bush's family, I think that the female gender was Price, and one of them was, he was a bit of a mafia man. I can't remember what it is on. If you look up, what was George Herbert, what was the elder of the two presidents' wife called? I think
Barbara Bush, of course.
But was she a Price?
Yes.
Because they've got that family tree that.
She was a Price.
If you look at her on Wikipedia, the brother of George Herbert Walker, he was. It was quite a mafia-like name, but and he looked like a bit of a gangster, but I can't remember it. Let me just keep going and reading off the name. So you remember Max Clifford? He died about 9 months ago, and Greg Hallett, in the last of his interviews with you, told you that he was going to approach Max Clifford to get the books published, because one of the books had been presented back to him by post, and all of the pages were in the wrong place and it was badly damaged. So Max Clifford, he's part of the Norse families that came across in the Norman conquest, and he's the one that used to run the diversionary orgies in London. So then you get to Swabia, and that is right on the border between. Did you understand that Alsace is actually the Swiss master race?
No, that's fascinating.
Well, so what happened? All the banking interests through Europe are also associated with Freemasonic activity, and that, I believe, is the thing that I've yet to find out more about on how the Shin was done. But the banking organisations are massively linked to Freemasonry, and that is how families like Goldsmith, they are the Commoner Kate lineage, as you know, and they're also, if you remember the stories that Greg told us, James Goldsmith was the bastard parent of Princess Di, and her mother was Shand Kidd, and all of that is Camilla's maiden name. So you look at the hodgepodge, that is Camilla, that was the secret lover of Charles when she was 18 and he was 17, and they had 2 children, and they, I believe, are closer to the throne than the other ones, who are the babies of King Juan Carlos and James Hewitt. And all of the other ones that were supposedly Prince Philip's children, because he's such a deviant, all of the other children were sired by Lord Plunket and Lord Porchester, and for that duty they were gifted the right to be in the triumvirate that ran narcotics all over the world, so that things like the IRA could keep the attention of what the British Royals and the Rothschilds were actually doing. It's absolutely amazing how they can get away with it. And now the parents are not allowed to smack the kids.